We're delighted to move from research to policy to get the perspective from those directly involved in the communities. And so I am delighted to introduce Mayor Steve Williams, who was elected mayor of Huntington, West Virginia in November 2012, re-elected in November 2016, and again in November 2020, making him Huntington's first three-time mayor. Since taking office, he has utilized his diverse background in economic development, finance, and state and local governments to shepherd a renaissance in Huntington that has not been seen in decades. Huntington also has gained recognition as the city of solutions for innovative programs to address the opioid epidemic. This includes the formation of a crisis intervention team that pairs mental health professionals with police officers to assist individuals suffering from a mental health crisis and/or substance use disorder. The city of Huntington also was one of 9 cities in 2018 named as a winner of Bloomberg Philanthropies Mayor's Challenge for its Compass Center, an innovative program that assists first responders with combating compassion fatigue as a result of the opioid epidemic. Mayor Williams is a past president and current board member of the West Virginia Municipal League. He also serves on the board of directors for the National League of Cities and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We're grateful to Mayor Williams for joining us to share about the impact of the opioid crisis on communities.
Good morning. Let's try it again. Good morning. You know what the difference is between major surgery and minor surgery? Major surgery is when I'm having it. Minor surgery is when you're having it. This is exactly what we've been dealing with across the nation, because every neighborhood, every household in the nation is experiencing major surgery. And they could give a flip what's happening in another neighborhood, but it's happening in my own backyard. This number says so much, and you might get a little bit torn as to what the number is. 145,285,246,490 opioid pills have been distributed within our community. That says it all right there. What Bill was alluding to earlier, that's where it started, and that's how we end up right where we are right now. And every neighborhood in the nation is experiencing major surgery. And so many of the people who have experienced major surgery are finding that some didn't make it out of surgery. 1999 to like I was already following behind Bill, taking all of his numbers down, and yours were probably much more accurate than mine. But between 1999 and 2023, there was 1,254,047 overdose deaths compared to 1,290 battlefield deaths since American Revolution. This tells us exactly what we're dealing with. The battle is not somebody coming into our borders and attacking us. Our battle is internal, and we've got problems that we have to deal with. We were warned in Huntington. I had a great chief of police, and he came to me after I'd been in office for a year. He came to me and said, "Mayor, there's something that's happening. Opioid pills are making their way in, and we're starting to see a presence of heroin." Now, the way I reacted to it is that I've got a great chief of police. I've got a police department that is being recognized as the top police department within the region. The police, they've got this. And then I found myself walking down the street a couple of months later, somebody pulling me aside said, "Mayor, you've got to do something. We don't feel safe in our neighborhood." I'm at the grocery store. Somebody comes up to me, "Mayor, you've got to do something. We don't feel safe allowing our children play in our backyard." I'm sitting in the pew at church, and someone comes up, "Mayor, you've got to do something. We have to do something." My police department has this under control, and I'm not criticizing my police department. What was life-changing for me is I got a call one evening saying, "We have 500 grams of heroin that have been distributed to this one house, and we're going to raid it in the morning. We want you to come and observe what's going on." And I went in, and honestly, everything that I started seeing scared the living daylights out of me. I've never observed anything like that. My background's in finance. I was an investment banker, a stockbroker. I don't know anything about this stuff. As we were preparing to go up at the top of the hill where all of the vehicles were assembled, I was on the very last vehicle that's going to be coming down the hill. They even had an armored car that was going to come down right up front because all our intel told us where the cameras were, where the bathrooms were, if certain cars were there, who would be there. We had the detail. And then as we came down that neighborhood, down the street in that neighborhood, and drove up into the front lawn, ripped the door right off of the front, my throat, my heart was in my throat. My police officers, my SWAT team, all at risk. Because as I said, there were cameras, could see what was coming in, but we didn't know who was in or what we were walking into. Fortunately, nobody was in there. But that 500 grams of heroin that had been delivered the night before, there was only 35 grams left. 465 grams of heroin had been distributed overnight, and I came to understand how sophisticated their delivery system was. And I came to understand with every gram of heroin, there's 10 separate hits. 4,650 hits had been delivered that evening, overnight. And people throughout the city of Huntington were now getting their hit. I was just driving back to the office. My mind is just racing. And as I'm sitting at the stoplight about to turn to where City Hall is, I look over and the most precious sight ever imagined to see. This was in early August, a row of children holding on to the rope, walking down the street with their kindergarten teachers, going on a field trip. And then I realized that's their target. That's who they're after next. I went walking into my office and I internally was screaming, somebody's got to do something. And then all of a sudden it hit me. What do you? I realized then, as mayor, I had to own it. I'd come to understand through history, if you name it, you can own it. And we started stating it for exactly what it was. Stating it that we have a problem that's here, that it's coming into our neighborhoods, and yes, I'm acknowledging that we have to fix this. And we tried everything. Once again, got my police department. And we organized sheriff's department, state police, other county sheriff's departments, all to come in to our arena. And one morning we were distributing to everybody every single warrant for arrest we were going to deliver. This was a roundup. Came together in the arena, and then at 8 a.m., boom, we hit the streets. And the word got out real quickly. See, we had a huge problem with folks coming in from Detroit and actually peddling this stuff. And we had a bus every day that would come from Detroit in and Detroit out. We got word about 10 o'clock, bus was full. Everybody was just scattering to get out. There was one that was even couldn't get on the bus, so he rented a taxi and was going across the river, going to drive all the way back to Detroit, and we nailed them right as they were going across the bridge. And there was all sorts of money, and there was all sorts of guns, and there was all sorts of dope. And I thought, yeah, baby, we got this. They know in Detroit, you don't go messing with Huntington, West Virginia. We're going to send you right on to jail. They just replaced and continued selling the stuff. Then I came to understand, can't arrest your way out. We've got to do something. Fortunately, we had a visit by Mike Botticelli, who was at the time the director of the National Office of Drug Control Policy. And he came in, and I was watching him going around meeting with individuals, talking to them from where they were to identify what's needed in the area and how the Obama administration at the time would be able to work to respond to this. And I thought, we need to do this. We created our little town, created our own Office of Drug Control Policy. And what we ended up finding at the time is that we didn't know what we didn't know. We knew that we had to do something. And I assembled a former retired police officer. I assembled a statistician and the spunkiest firefighter you would ever find in the world right there, Jan Raid. And they went out and started meeting with everyone. What ended up developing is that they started coming together and started putting together a comprehensive plan as to how to approach this. What we did is we created the first syringe exchange program in the state of West Virginia, the harm reduction program. And as we were starting to talk with others, we started then making sure that every one of our police officers and firefighters were being equipped with naloxone. Back at that time, that was controversial. They were saying, we're not going, and you know how we ended up making the justification why every police officer needed to have it? Is because there was fentanyl that was making its way into the area, and as it would become airborne, we needed to make sure that our first responders could have naloxone just to revive themselves or revive. And if we have that on our own self, and we see that this somebody is overdosing, then we have a legal responsibility to make sure that they're revived. We started making some progress. What we ended up learning is that you start talking to the individuals, start communicating with one another, start cooperating with one another, then you start creating a collaboration. In that collaboration establishes a level of trust. That trust leads to partnerships. That's the pathway to hope. We're not bringing large groups into ballrooms. It's one table at a time. And then there's individuals that you start finding that are hiding in plain sight, like Jan. There's this one very innovative businessman, Joe Murphy, decided that he was going to help, and he ended up coming up together, hold it up, Joe, the opioid naloxone emergency box. They've distributed 13,000 these boxes around the country so that individuals, there is an instruction tutorial as to how to actually go about using it. Not yet. Everybody's going to come and stand in line for you. Eyes are up here. They'll be down there a little bit. So the whole idea is individuals coming together. When you get brilliant people around the table, it's amazing how much brilliance is actually discovered. What we ended up learning in Huntington, as small of a town as we are, we like to say in municipalities that cities are laboratories of innovation. If that's the case, then the small cities are the petri dish. What we have found that we could do is that we can bring people together just around these, and we start worrying about where's the data going to come from, evidence-based solutions. Boom! Bring some ideas forward. Grow a pair. Go do, because the whole idea is that everybody comes together and then we start moving ourselves forward. I've said all along, I want to be the pilot project. We will be the pilot project. I was talking to former mayor of New York City. We were having a conversation about this, and the one thing that he ended up saying, talking about, how is it that you're doing so many things? And I said, you know the difference between New York City and Huntington, West Virginia? Nothing but zeros. Nothing but zeros in your population. We're dealing with the same stuff. The difference between New York City and Huntington is we can identify sooner what works, quicker what doesn't, and faster how to fix it. And once I do that, then we can scale it to the larger cities, to the larger states. In August of 2016, we were feeling pretty cocky. Overdoses were starting to work their way down, and then in mid-August, one afternoon, fentanyl arrived. 28 overdoses in a 4-hour period in a 3-block radius. 2 people died because they shot up alone. The other 26 people did not die. Mike Botticelli came up to me at a meeting of an opioid task force that we had over in Covington, Kentucky a few days later. Bless his heart, I stand over top of him, and I felt like I was being called to see the principal. He said, the director wants to go walking in, and he looks up at me, grabs me by the shoulders, tears in his eyes. He said, because of what you're doing, there weren't 2,000, but we found out all we did was revive them. We learned later that not one person of that 26 who had not died was referred to treatment. One lady, 6 weeks after this occurred, got it accepted into a Suboxone program, but she died 2 days before. Her family, 6 months later, in February, got word that she had been accepted into a treatment program. And they had to call and say, we buried her in September. If we don't move people to treatment, we're not saving their lives. Only when we get people moving to treatment are we saving their lives. And as a result of that, we ended up creating the quick response team that within 48 hours after an overdose, we have a team that comes together that was explained to you to some degree last night. Fact of the matter is, everything is moving, everything is changing. We're dealing with homelessness. We're dealing, as Bill pointed out, the level of methamphetamines being mixed with fentanyl. Honest to goodness, I don't really know what we do next. All I know is we can't give up. And the one issue is, I keep hearing people say, and we heard it last night, and it's everything I can do to keep from groaning, because I understand what people are saying. There's no silver bullet. But when I've been to those meetings and people are saying there's no silver bullet, I feel like, you're just making an excuse. Actually, we do have silver bullets in there. 46,000 of them. Every person has an assignment. Every person has to step forward. And if you're not willing to step forward, then get out of the way. We have settlement money into the billions to be able to work with, but if we're not willing to make aggressive, innovative, entrepreneurial decisions and making sure that we have real-time data, only then will we be able to figure out what works, what doesn't, figure it out sooner, quicker, and faster, and then be able to make an adjustment. What we have to do, everyone in this room has to be able to make our own decision, your own commitment. What are you going to do about it? And within your community, what are we going to do about it? In our state, what you going to do about it? Sadly, if we didn't have ever again a gram of heroin, a gram of fentanyl, a single opioid tablet ever be distributed again, we're still going to be dealing with the aftermath, what we have been encountering for the next 40 years. So we find ourselves making a decision. Of those 1,254,547 deaths, are we going to make sure that there was meaning in their struggle? It's in our lab. Time to go to work. Thank you. Take some questions.
Mayor Williams, if you will, we'll do about 7-8 minutes of questions from the audience. We have a couple microphones being passed around. Please introduce yourself and your organization.
Hi, Mayor Williams. Thank you very much.
Ma'am.
My name is Claudia Gross-Shader. I work for the City of Seattle.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And I couldn't agree with you more about the access to real-time information. Bill talked about how policymakers are always fighting the last war. And that's absolutely true in my experience in Seattle. And we heard it from you today in the stories that you told from your city. What are some of the tools that you think that local governments need to avoid fighting the last war? Access to real-time data would be helpful for us. Our toxicology screening labs in the state, they're way backed up. And access to real-time data on what is in the contents of our street drugs would be hugely helpful, because we have adulterants coming into the street drugs in Seattle, xylazine or tranq, that interfere with the naloxone, the resuscitation. And so our first responders need to do rescue breathing then,
Yes.
in addition to administering Narcan. So we need access to that real-time tox screening. I think that we also need access to real-time information from pilots in other jurisdictions about what is working in these other jurisdictions. It would be nice for cities to be able to learn from each other in real time. And then in terms of the research community, it's great when there is rigorous research that's published, but rigorous research isn't very accessible to policymakers because it's behind a paywall, usually. Also, it's not written for policymakers. So real-time access to translation materials are things that I think would be helpful. And I know you've been thinking about it hard too, and would love to hear from you.
We have access. It was indicated I'm on the board of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and National League of Cities. It's amazing the research that we end up drawing out of that, and how bringing municipalities together, as we even had a task force of cities and counties coming together early on, start identifying where we can find the real-time data, how we can start. I was meeting with the director of the CDC recently at an event where we were speaking, and I said, my problem is your data is dated. Because when I try to rely on something from the CDC, it's as though I'm in a baseball game and the pitcher throws the pitch and I'm 2 innings later swinging the bat. There's no way I'm able to get, and I told her that. And I said, now, I do understand the only way you, CDC, gets real-time data is that if we change our healthcare system so that, once again, I'm coming with a bias from brokerage and investment banking. We have the most sophisticated free enterprise system in the world, and the publicly traded companies every quarter report their earnings. Every quarter. How are we not able to do this within our own healthcare system? But it's because of our healthcare system that we just don't have that. But the way that we end up getting it locally, the three C's that I was talking about: cooperation, communication, collaboration, leads to partnerships, establishes trust. As we have in Marshall University, we have a medical school. We got them involved, and then all of a sudden there was a division of addiction sciences. Jan worked in the emergency room in her off time from being police chief and firefighter and everything else. In the emergency room, we were able to go and make sure that the emergency room were providing real-time data as it related to overdoses from the emergency room. Don't let the fact research is complicated and lengthy, don't let that get in your way. Every one of you have access to academia to be able to plug in to that research. You get 5 people around the table. There's talent hiding in plain sight there. And it's amazing what we're starting to see, all the things that we're seeing developing in our little town, simply by everybody coming together and learning to communicate, coordinate, collaborate. And then the outcome is hope. There is a pathway to hope. The pathway to hope is at every table that you have.